Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us again today for Exploring Blue Culture Voices from the Field. We wanted to start off by thanking everyone for joining us on Wednesday, and if you had sent us some questions to info@growblueculture.com, we were having a few glitches which are taken care of now, so please continue to send in your questions. Today, we are joined by Blue Courage Master Trainers Michael Nila, Jack Hart, our cultural anthropologists, Robert Adams and Ken Price. And we do have our special guest with us today, Chief Art Acevedo from the Houston Police Department. I'll now turn it over to Jack. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Becky. Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar. Thank you all for taking time out of your day to join us. Special thanks to the Blue Courage and the Thomas Leland team for doing so much to get this up and running, including the website, the emails, and opening up this room for us today. So thank you again for joining us. Today is Juneteenth and marks the 155th anniversary of when enslaved African-American people in Texas were read these military orders by Union General Gordon Granger, declaring, quote, absolute equality of rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, end quote. And in that moment, our nation's promise of a new and different future finally, 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, finally made it to the farthest corners of the South. On this day, let us all be reminded of the inalienable rights in our nation's founding documents, ideals, and principles, such as the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Emancipation Proclamation, the 13th Amendment, and society's highest aspiration of justice may all be self-evident, but they are not self-executing. Let us all, policing and our communities, be reminded of our oath and our collective moral responsibility to bring equity, equality, humanity, and inclusion fully into existence. Why not today? Why not now? And why not us? Good afternoon, Michael. I know this idea of the self-evident but not self-executing ideals resonates with you deeply.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's on this special day and considering the fact that it took 2.5 years for it to at least be fully realized as a nation, we begin to realize how slow we tend to move. And while we talk so often about our Constitution and even our Declaration of Independence, I'm always reminded that those are simply words on a piece of paper. Sacred documents, you know, some described as our Constitution described as the greatest governing document in the history of the world. But they're just words on a piece of paper. It's the collective us that brings them into existence. You know, our police officers on the front lines in our communities 24/7, they're the executors of those sacred documents. Our legislators, when they pass laws, theoretically should be a reflection of the principles expressed in the Constitution. Our judges sitting on the bench, you know, overseeing justice. So it's us that brings these sacred documents to life, or we erode them by how we administer justice, by how we interact with our people, by how we enforce laws. And so I'm always conscious of the fact that while our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence, our other governing documents are absolutely sacred, it is the collective us that truly brings life to those documents or erodes them in terms of their meaning and intent.
Thank you so much. Well, let's introduce our panel for today's discussion. In his 50th year in policing, Police Commander Emeritus and founder of Blue Courage, welcome Michael Nila. Thank you for being here. An applied cultural anthropologist and senior engagement leader, consultant, and executive coach with Thomas Leland, welcome Dr. Ken Price. A cultural anthropologist who specializes in diversity and inclusion, mindful leadership, organizational change, and strategic planning, welcome Dr. Robert Adams Jr. And in his 35th year in policing, Houston Police Chief and President of the Major Cities Chiefs Association, welcome Chief Art Acevedo. Welcome. So before we jump in, why don't we, before we get to this discussion, let's just take a moment to briefly review some key words and some key learnings from our first webinar just this very past Wednesday. If you have the courage to be in this room and engaging in this cultural exploration journey, we must first look into the mirror of life and ask ourselves these 3 key tough questions about policing. How are we led? How are we acculturated? And how are we educated? Culture is defined as the collection of shared values, beliefs, behaviors, and attitudes which are expected, reinforced, and rewarded within the group. Now, building a positive culture it requires maximizing performance. And I love that phrase. It's about getting results and intentionally expecting, reinforcing, and rewarding positive values and behaviors across the organization. Love that idea of, if you take one word away from last Wednesday, it has to be intentionally, that we can do it if we choose to do so. But the challenge, now that we understand what culture is, now we have to identify, where do we look? And so what we need to do is to identify those cultural gaps that exist between the ideal, which is the formal and stated culture, and the real, the informal and unstated culture, or how we actually experience the culture of policing. So what we can learn so far, and our takeaways from both Ken and Robert, who their science and their wisdom have been really brought to the table here. I had a few takeaways from them, and I'm sure we'll have much more. Number one, that culture is a thing, and it is a result of things. In other words, that it exists, but it also can be pushed and pulled into existence. Number two, that everybody is a leader in policing. Therefore, all of us, regardless of formal or informal leadership, we all must scan the organization from in it and also a bit detached, a bit above it. Third, we also have intentionally using our authority and influence to shift the unhealthy or negative aspects of our culture while also preserving the healthy and positive aspects of our culture. Such a great way to build empathy with the existing organization and keeping those good aspects going. And finally, with all of this in mind, we must lean into this discomfort and the dis-ease of this moment to find our humanity, to recommit to the highest principles of service, justice, and fundamental fairness, and then to courageously win the hearts and minds and trust of everyone within and outside of the culture. So these slides will be made available to all of our attendees at growblueculture.com and also pushed out to you. So if they went a little bit too fast and you're trying to take those notes, don't worry, we'll be able to send those to you. So without further ado, let's hear from our panelists, Michael, Ken, and Robert, as they lead us in a discussion with a tremendous voice in the field, Chief Hart Acevedo. Michael.
Chief, I'm so grateful that you are here with us. I know that your time is very precious. You're pulled in a million different directions. And on Juneteenth today, I'm sure your city is experiencing hopefully peaceful honoring of that day. So grateful you're here with us. My first question to you is that, as Jack just illuminated, that this exploration is about culture, what it is, how it's shaped, what is the role of leadership and education, and certainly where does policing go from here, from this this moment that we find ourselves in. I follow you on Twitter, and one of the things that I'm absolutely amazed at is you seem to be everywhere, and you seem to be everywhere all the time. You know, I see your tweets at 1 in the morning, and 3 in the morning, and New Year's Eve, and Christmas Eve, and you're on the street, and you're making arrests, and you're with your officers, and I marvel at that. And I also note that, you know, being the voice of major city chiefs and the 4th largest police city in our country, that you don't shy away from commenting on issues that are often quite controversial, that directly influence your community of Houston and also the policing profession. I marvel at your presence. And so can you talk about how much leadership presence means to shaping culture, shaping the belief systems of our police officers? Because I know a lot of police executives who rarely get out of their office, or are rarely out from behind their computers or emails, or out of meetings. You seem to be the opposite. Can you comment about how powerful that is to shaping culture?
Well, good afternoon, guys. Thank you all for having me, and thank you for Michael, for what you and your team have done over the years. I had the privilege of bringing Blue Courage to Austin, and it's really interesting that some people would just be dismissed as just warm and fuzzy stuff. No, it's really thoughtful stuff that makes everyone take a deep breath and start reminding ourselves why we became police officers in the first place, why we chose to pursue the noble profession of being guardians of the peace. And I can just say that I've said this before, and I'll say it again: you can't change culture via memo. You can't change culture from behind a desk. You cannot build relationships with the people you lead or the people you serve, and build the emotional capital that you will need as a leader of people and a servant of a community, unless they know you, unless they feel you, unless they know what's on your mind. And I'll be honest with you. I think that I've come in from the outside twice now as and when they bring you in from the outside to a department, they're bringing you in for a reason. They're not happy with the culture. They're not happy with the status. They're not happy with the direction or the history. And I think that there's a mistake that people make when they say that go slow. No, before, you can't go slow, because the problem is they brought you in for change. And I'm of the belief that the cops in the community are smart. If you take the time to engage them and make them understand what the mission is, what the vision is, what we're going to do, why we're going to do it, and let them know what we're going to achieve and enjoy when we reach our destination, I promise you, they're going to follow you. Don't get me wrong. The children of the corn can't stand me, right? I mean, I call that, that 2%, the children of the corn. They hate their wives. They hate their cats. They hate the community. They hate the sergeant. They spend 30 years in the back of show up or roll call, MF in the world, and they don't realize that the only one they're impacting is themselves, because nobody's paying attention to them. And so if you're going to be a leader, it is a full-time job. My bride's been with me since 1998 when we met and we started dating, and she started getting serious. I go, you need to know something. I was a lieutenant in LA with the California After. I go, you need to know that on New Year's Eve, you will not be going to a party with me, because on New Year's Eve, I don't care what my assignment is, I will be on patrol with my men and women. It's a very challenging night. It's the new beginning for the organization. Symbolically, we're moving the organization, our relationship forward. And God bless her. She's been with me since 1998. We've only been together one Year's Eve, and that's when Michigan State about 3 years ago was in the College Bowl series, and they were going to play at Dallas Stadium. And she looked at me with a little tear in her eyes. I went to Michigan State. My mom got her doctorate, and I've never got to go to a football game. So it was Michigan State versus Alabama. We spent a lot of money, and it was 10-0 at the end of the first half, and it went downhill from there. That's the only time I missed on New Year's Eve. And so people will follow you, but they've got to know you. People will trust you if they know you. If people know that your heart's in the right place, even if they don't agree with you, and if you're consistent, they will lead. And let me just finish with this, and then you guys can pick my brain a little bit. There's not much there. I remember in Austin, the place needed a lot of work when I got there. And I remember telling them, the train is leaving the station, the train being this new administration, this new chief. Jump on the train. I promise you, when we get to our destination, it's going to be a great place. We are on the move. And if you can either join the movement or you can stand on the railroad tracks, and we're going to run you over. And some people listened, some people didn't. And I promise you that the majority that listened, they liked where we left it. So it is a full-time job, Michael, and people think I'm crazy. I get up in the middle of the night, I'm tweeting. People turn off their alerts because I'm tweeting at night. But I think this is a calling. Leadership is a privilege, and you have to earn it 24/7, 365.
Thank you so much, Art. I love your comment that people have to feel you. And in order for them to feel you, that feeling is not coming from an email, it's coming from your presence.
Yes.
And they see you, and they can feel you, and they can touch you. And what I love about what you said the most is, whether they agree with you or not, if they feel you and they know your heart and your intentions in the right place, they're willing to go with you.
We're very forgiving. People don't realize, the one thing about leadership and about cultural change and about policing, I always tell my people, look, at the end of any given night, we don't kill somebody unjustly, violate somebody's constitutional rights, or one of us get hurt or killed. Nothing that we are going to do that doesn't work, what direction we're going, we can change it. If it doesn't work, let's try it. If it doesn't work, let's try something else. Because in an organization that doesn't continue to try to evolve and seek an opportunity every single day to do a little better as an individual, as a unit, as a division, and as an organization, and like LAPD did back in the 80s, and thank God for Bill Bratton when he came from the outside, they thought they had arrived. Well, if you're here as your performance and you think you got nowhere to go, there's only one way to go if you think you're on top, and that's down. But if you seek every day as an opportunity to do better, in a 10-year period, you're gonna have your ups and downs, but if you start here today, you're gonna end up here, and at least you'll show some progress.
Wow.
Thank you so much, Chief. Ken, I know you have a question for the Chief.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thanks you for joining us today. I'm thinking about what you said initially, that this is not just a kind of warm, fuzzy, nice to have, that it's a lot of what the guts of this job is really about and what the profession is about, and it's what society is about ultimately. I mean, one thing that I would argue that we really need to pay attention to is that people have been calling recently in particular for change in the culture of policing as a really common refrain right now, which gives you a sense that, okay, there's a lot of urgency on this and it's not just a nice to have. I would argue it's definitely a question of culture of policing in society. It can't just be policing alone. I mean, policing is also a representation and it's a part of society. So it's the interrelationship, and certainly policing and communities. And that's where a lot of, I think our passion comes to. How can we get that relationship into a really positive and healthy place? And there's a lot of work. One thing I heard you saying that really resonated for me is that you said you need to have a strong vision. When you come in, especially from outside, you need to be able to put that vision out there, repeat it, and then you got to role model it in so many different ways that you were talking about. That fits exactly with our notion of what you need to do to change culture, right? That's expect, reinforce, and the last one's reward. So that's my question is, this is a really hard question, I think, because how do you feel and what do you do to reward the right values, beliefs, and behaviors in your teams and with your officers and your staff?
You know, what's interesting is that people don't realize that cops, as gruff as they can be, and they try to act like they don't care, they care deeply about getting positive feedback. I don't care if it's the rookie or the 30-year officer. And I don't like talking about this too much because it's too much about me as a person. But believe me when I say two things. One, the biggest mistake an organization does is that we all set the bar high, right? Everybody says, if you lie, when I got here, I made a videotape and I told my cops, if you lie, you die. Redemption starts with telling me the truth. And by the way, even if the underlying act of misconduct is so egregious that even with the truth, you're going to be fired, you get to keep one thing that you have 100% control over. That the sergeant doesn't like you, doesn't matter. The chief doesn't like you, doesn't matter. The community doesn't like you, doesn't matter. But you have complete control of your integrity. You get to walk out the door with your integrity that only you can take away from yourself. But the problem is that too many leaders set the bar high, but they don't enforce the standard. And people are watching, right? And so you come to Houston, you ask any cop, if you lie, if they don't tell you what, if you ask them, what does this chief say about lying? And if they tell you, if you lie, you what? If they don't say you die, I will buy you lunch, winner's choice, but you got to give me the officer's name because I need to go counsel them. But it's important that you not just hold people accountable when they fall short. You also have to build them up. If you ever want to really irritate me, two things. I always tell my leadership cadre, for every negative comment, discipline, you should try to find 10 good reasons to actually recognize people. And what these people have told me here, these men and women, the biggest compliments when you have old heads come up and say, I've never talked to the chief. I've been here for 24 years. I've never gotten an email from the chief. Every time that there's a commendation in this department with 6,500 employees, every commendation, every what we call, memorandum of commendation, they're there on my desk, comes through my desk. Every single one gets a handwritten note from the police chief. Every single one. Now, does that take work? Absolutely. But that work builds emotional capital, right? The simple things. Senator John Whitmire is a dear friend of mine, the dean of our Senate, and also the chair of public safety in Texas in the Senate. Had lunch with some officer the other day, didn't tell me the name. He says, this guy's been around for 25 years, and the union was mad at me about the way I was handling the protests. Imagine they were going to do a vote on no confidence. And like I explained to them, hey man, I ain't here to be your prom king. I could care less about your votes of no confidence. I'm here to lead. This isn't Burger King. You don't get to have it your way. And I explained to them, take your vote of no confidence. I promise you, I'm going to eat your lunch with it when it comes back. And I can tell you about that in Austin when that happened. Well, you know what so the senator asked him, he said, hey, you know, the union's kind of talking a little smack about the chief. They're talking about voting over confidence. He goes, what do you think will happen? The officer's response was, we don't always agree with the chief, but we agree with them most of the time. And they're going to be very mistaken if they think that we're not going to give them a vote of confidence, because I've been here for 20 odd years. And this chief is the only chief that's ever come up to me and said, hey man, I'm really proud of you and the work that you're doing. Those little things that build people up, really, it builds this emotional capital. When you when you're working patrol as a new chief, and I work on patrol on a regular basis, I get a black and white, turn on my MDT here in Houston, go out, I catch them, but I don't clean them up, right? It's my therapy when I'm on patrol. So I turn them over. And I'd been here for for about 6 months. I saw an officer that had heard that I'd never met him before. I had heard that his daughter, just a week before, was going through leukemia. This guy's a senior officer. I turn over the DWI to him. When the backup unit shows up, I walk up to, hey, by the way, how's your daughter doing with the leukemia? When you take the time to get to know your troops, and you take the time to acknowledge them, and you take the time to acknowledge them when they're good, dust them off and build them up when they make mistakes, as long as it's not of the heart, I promise you, if there's leaders on this, you can't buy that somewhere else. When they know you care, they will follow you. When we were over here in Houston, I've had a mayor of another big city call me, how in the world have you guys so far, knock on wood, most diverse city in the country? How in the world our city's not burning, our city's not, you know, none of this stuff is going on? And I said, because we build relationships before the bad times happen, one, and two, we haven't slept in 3 weeks as a leadership cadre because we've been out there with our officers, marching with these folks, showing them that it's, even if you get some rocks thrown at you, don't overreact. Because if you overreact, you start gassing people, you start doing all that stuff. Once you start popping tear gas, that's an escalation that you're not coming back. So unless the city's burning, and so you got to lead from the front. I was telling Michael yesterday that when I got here, 16, we had the Super Bowl in 17. The mayor offered me the job on November 15th. And I go, when do you want me? He said, in 2 weeks. I said, why so fast? That's quick. He goes, well, we got the Super Bowl in February. And I told him, okay, Mayor, I'm gonna give my 2-week notice, I'm coming. But if it goes well, I'm gonna say you got me here in time. If it goes to hell, I'm gonna say you got me here too late. That's just a caveat. But we had a lot of protests because the Super Bowl was here, and they had never had the police chief going out on protest with them and driving around the black and white by himself, except instead of with a damn posse, you know, like you're the president of the United States, when you're no different than a cop, a rookie, you just happen to have a different set of responsibilities. And this officer comes up to me, I've been here for like 2 months, and he says, hey, Chief, can we tell you something? Yeah, a couple cops. What's going on? He goes, if we tell you your nickname, do you promise not to get upset? Go ahead, guys. What is it? We're calling you Artie the one-man party because we're not used to a police chief getting the black and white, you know, or when Hurricane Harvey hit and we explained to them that the world's about what was about to come was going to absolutely be biblical in proportion, what was coming our way, and that our department and their careers, the people on right now during Harvey and right now during these protests, these are defining moments in your career. And the question is, what do you want to be said about you? So during Harvey, our men and women didn't go home for 6 straight nights. They worked 24/7, 24/7. 650 of our houses flooded. You know how many people abandoned post here? 0. Because the chiefs never went home. One chief went home on a Saturday. You know, it hit Saturday. Remember, it hit Saturday night. He went home that night. He didn't come back till Wednesday. And by the way, he ended up not being an assistant chief after that. Because how can you be an absent leader when the whole department was on? So again, you've got to lift them up. You've got to lead from the front. Huh?
Fantastic. Authenticity, humanity, and absolutely showing up. Robert, yeah. I know you have a question as well for the chief.
All right, guys. I know I'm long.
Oh, you're great.
No, it's great. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to my relatives in Texas. Happy Juneteenth. They're in Houston and Austin. Yeah. But Chief, for me, when I come into doubts or I'm managing a crisis, I turn to writers like James Baldwin, Audre Lorde, to kind of help inspire me and renew my batteries. Is there a writer or a book or a leader that you turn to for inspiration during those tough times when you're negotiating conflict or other challenges?
Well, this is going to be corny, but I turn to God. I mean, I really believe that God, as a person of faith, I don't judge anybody. That's for God. If you don't, my sister says she doesn't believe in God. And I always tell my big sister, Sandra, I love her. She's crazy, but I love her. She's like a second mom. And I always tell her, I said, sis, if God doesn't exist, I've lived a wonderful fantasy. You know, Jesus doesn't exist. I've lived a great fantasy full of hope and all this other stuff. And, but if he does exist, you're screwed. So I think I like my odds better. But I always turn to scripture. I don't go to any one church because my dad always had a problem with organized religion. He said your relationship with God should be personal. But I do go to different churches. But I pray before any public speaking. So I always tell people, if you liked it, I was listening to the good Lord. If you don't like it, then the devil's whispered in my ear when I wasn't paying attention. But I do like, I think my faith carries me. And, you know, the haters always say, we're going to lose your jobs. Like, you know, here's the thing about leadership. If you're not willing to lose your job, you cannot lead. Michael talked about standing up and taking controversial positions. People, let me tell you something. History is watching us as leaders. God gave us these positions, our leadership, our communication positions. If you don't stand for nothing, for something, you stand for nothing other than keeping your job. And so what I do like to read those, I like to read like Grant's biography, a lot of historical books, Storm and Norman's book, Colin Powell's, you know, where his mama used to say, tomorrow will be a better day. My daddy used to tell me, hey, if you're not afraid to lose, you can't lose, you've already won, right? And then he always told us, just remember that the United States gave us the best gift of all as a Cuban refugee in 1968, 12/12/68. That was our, you know, the day that we got freedom. We arrived in the United States. He goes, remember this, kids, the worst day with the freedom that this country is going to bring you is better than the best day under communist Cuba. And so you came into this world with nothing. You're going to leave with nothing. Just do your very best. And so you got to have the right mindset, and you have to be willing to put yourself at risk. Leaders put themselves at risk, right? When your troops see you for 3.5 hours last week, after 60,000 people marched in Houston, Texas, for the Floyd family, for 3.5 hours, I disappeared in the middle of the night, surrounded by thousands of people, many of them very angry. Needless to say, my team tuned me out the next day when I surfaced. But the message that sent the troops was, okay, the chief somehow is managing to survive. That means that we're here in numbers with our mobile field forces. We don't have to overreact. Some people are throwing stuff, but guess what? If we don't overreact, we stay calm. You got to model that stuff. So
I love that, Chief. I love that, Chief.
Tomorrow will be a better day.
Your courage,
Yeah,
your courage of showing up gives everyone else permission to be courageous, and that really reigns true.
Yeah.
I know Michael had a follow-up.
Empathy.
Oh, and empathy, absolutely, being with them. Michael, I know you had a follow-up question for the Chief.
Yeah, just real quick, because I know we are running out of time. This is going by way too fast. But you just started to touch on it, Art. And you know, as someone who comes from an immigrant family, I'm curious as to how your journey and being an immigrant in this country, how it informs you as a police officer, and how it informs you certainly as a police chief as well. Because obviously this is the topic of the day. Next.
Yeah, I think that. You know, it's really interesting with when white activists, right, that try to tell me after a controversial shooting, get in my face. They try to tell me what it's like to be a person of color. I'm like, are you kidding me? Who do you think you're talking to here? I'm an immigrant. I've faced discrimination as a child, as a cop, as an assistant chief. I'm a whistleblower in California with 14 days of hearings, and thank good Lord that the facts and the evidence were on my side. I got a 71-page ruling to demonstrate that. But, you know, I really believe that what people forget, that we as a nation have done a very poor job of looking at others through the prisms of the eyes that we're looking at instead of the ones we're looking from, okay? And I think for the first time, George Floyd, for the first time in 34 years, all of us here are middle-aged, except Michael, he's really a teenager at heart. But all of us here realize that policing is a much better place to, that's what really hurts my heart, because I think everyone knows that these cops, if we would have had these cameras 40 years ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation because we already fixed the problem, right? But if we had these cameras 40 years ago, the cities would still be burning from the stuff that was going on compared to today. Having said that, I think that for the first time, 8 minutes and 46 seconds, that the former officer Chauvin sat on the neck of George Floyd has awakened this nation, that for the first time in my lifetime, we're starting to look at things not through the prisms of our own life experiences, of our own values, of our own pains, of our own priorities, but through the prisms of the people that comprise the greatest nation on earth, this rich fabric that we call America, that's, you know, every, I mean, we have 110 languages spoken in our school district. And I've got a lot of hope, Michael, because if somebody would have told me that NASCAR would have banned the Confederate flag a month ago, if someone would have told me that NASCAR drivers would have put together a media piece about Black Lives Matter, I would have told them, you are crazy. You see, because what people forgot, that while the Confederate flag for many, and I do believe this, that just because somebody wants to, because I know a lot of Southern folks that really, they're not racist. They really aren't. They just, it's their culture, it's their heritage, and I understand that. But I think for the first time, people are realizing that although for them that's their culture and their heritage. I gave the speech the other day, and I said, to me, the Confederate flag to the African American community is almost like the Nazi, the SS, the swastika is to the Jewish community. And I think that people have finally come to that realization. It's, you know, that maybe the feelings of others is worth me being a little bit more discreet about my own heritage. And that's a first, man. And I am so hopeful. And let me just close with this on this matter. You know, I shed tears with, I mean, these look like hardcore gangsters that, you know, they got their, you know, because of the tattoos they have on, that they're hardcore gangsters. We were shedding tears together out there. And this was real pain. I mean, it has changed my heart even more being out there. But I think that our best days lie ahead of us, because the country has realized it's not just about the police, that a lot of the problems that we end up having to deal with is because of the greater failure of this country to come to grasp and recognize the disproportionality in healthcare and education and mental health and economic opportunity and the lack of housing. I mean, there's a great awakening. So let's not give up on each other. Let's remind our officers that although the focus is on them, that it's really well beyond them. There's, you know, let's talk about transparency. What's going on in our courtrooms? What's going on with our DAs? What's going on with a lot of things? And I think that there's some great days ahead. And my mind's going 100 miles an hour. There's like 20 things after this, but I'm sorry.
I know we want to honor you and honor your time. So just one last question from me, if you don't mind. We're coming up to Father's Day weekend, and I know that you are a father of 3. I am a father of 2, one 5-year-old boy and one 3-year-old girl. And while I'm not with them at this moment, I can just visualize little Quinn running around with my handcuffs as we speak, making siren noises and trying to cuff his little sister. I swear I don't bring that kind of culture home, I swear. But do you have any advice for a policing parent whose kids may or may not understand the state of our profession and country? How do we be the superheroes we hope they see when they look at us?
Well, I think first thing we need to do is that we need to make sure that when I have to fire an officer, I've had to run about 160 officers since I've been here. They've either been fired or they've resigned in lieu of termination, or they've retired rather than be terminated, which I can't stop. Okay, I don't have the authority to stop them from retiring, no matter how much some of the critics try to say I do to try to tear down trust. But I think that we have to, number one, the news is not a place for kids to be watching. We got to make sure that our kids are watching what they're supposed to be watching. I got to start with my own kid. He's 12 years old. When things were hot here one Friday night, and I get a text from him at 11:40 at night. Dad, are you okay? Little Jake, I'm worried about you. And so I had to write back, you're not supposed to be watching the news. But I think that when I have to fire somebody, what I think about the most is the families, because we are heroes to our children. And I think that to the officers that might think about not doing the right thing, when you leave that door, when you go to work, your children are seeing a superhero leave that house, that apartment. So when you leave and you feel like you're going to do something stupid, think about your child needing you to come back as a superhero. So if you don't want to do it for the person that may not look like you, if you don't want to do it for the department, if you don't want to do the right thing for a stranger, do the right thing for your child. Because the one thing that would hurt most to me if I fail as a police officer would be the impact and the shame it would bring to my own child and the hurt it would bring my own family. And so be that hero. You know what? Who's got complete control over that? We do. Nobody. Like cops have a culture, and unions. Oh, look at this policy. They bitch about policy constantly. I know I'm supposed to use that word on this, but I apologize. They complain about policy, yet the second they do something stupid that's not in policy, what do they ask? Hey, where's that in policy? Well, you can't have it both ways. That's why we have something called sound judgment. It's kind of a catch-all, right? And so what I've always told my officers is that I had sergeants that could not stand me on the California Highway Patrol, a couple of them. But here's the problem. I knew policy, the law, and state law, and criminal statute better than they did. So if you know policy and you know the law, wrap yourself around it. And if the community doesn't like it, it's on the department. It's not on you. So I would say,
and you clearly led them, and you clearly love them. And
yes,
you can't lead anybody you don't love.
That's exactly.
They may not agree with you, but you know, in order to keep ourselves as the superheroes, we have to have someone out there loving us enough.
Yes.
Step in.
You can question my decisions, Jack, and I tell this to my cops all the time, and I tell this to the community. You can question my decisions, you can question my judgment, but you can't question my heart. I dare anyone to come here and tell me in my face, I don't care. Because we put ourselves at risk as leaders. It is self-evident when you put yourself at risk as leaders. And quite frankly, people know bullshit when they see it, and they know genuine care when they see it. And if they know you care, they know you're willing to put yourself at risk for them, they're going to follow you, and they're going to support you out in the community.
Thank you, Chief. Michael, can you bring this session to a close?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to close it.
I don't either.
We're getting comments saying 30 minutes is not enough for this wisdom.
Let's do it again.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask you. Can we bring you back, Chief? But also, there's been some wonderful comments. We will get them to you and get some answers from perspectives from you on the comments and questions that came from the panel, and then we'll get these back to the panel. But just for me, I just want to tell you, Chief, you know I love you immensely. We all love you. You said it best. History is watching us. Our profession, the men and women in this profession, and all of the 330 million Americans, we need your courageous leadership, and I'm very, very grateful that you are here with us.
Cops watching?
Yeah, oh yes.
Hey, do not listen to the haters. This is the best educated, best trained, most professional generation of policing in the history of policing, but we can be better. So if you want to shut the haters up, help weed out the few bad guys, and just remember that for every time we get it wrong, there are tens of thousands of times we get it right. And one of the things we have to do as leaders, and we're working on it here, is that we cannot just let the bad shooting or the time that we got the murder suspect like we had today, armed robber, African-American male, wanted with 4 felony warrants out of Louisiana, right? Comes here, commits a robbery in 2 minutes. Our men and women got him, started pursuing him. He crashed, he stops, shoots at our car, hits our car, goes out, keeps going in pursuit. We pick him up again. takes foot bail, right? We set up a containment, a perimeter, which is what you should do when you have an armed suspect for your own safety. We're not invincible. And 30 minutes later, with the help of K9 and Arrow, we took him into custody with just one dog bite on him. And so we as leaders have got to tell those stories of every time, thousands of times when things go right, and push back on the false narrative that we only take white people into custody that are violent. We take in violent suspects into custody all the time, regardless of color, because most of the time our men and women today are, the truth still is, they're doing the right things for the right reasons, whether or not they're being watched, and we need to acknowledge that. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Art.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
All you need me. Robert, good to see you, man. Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Am I buzzing off now?
Absolutely. Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Chief.
thanks everybody.
Really appreciate you.
Inspiring.
Thank you. Yes.
Take care.
Robert, 30 seconds. What are you feeling right now? What comes to heart and mind after this session?
Oh, I just feel really just, that leadership is really the key. That vision and leadership and spreading it around, it's infectious.
Ken, 30 seconds. How are you feeling?
It's a demonstration of courage, inspires me to be more courageous.
Michael.
Well, I'm just struck by the history is watching us, all of us, and we'll be judged by how we showed up now. So I'm grateful for everybody who showed up here just to listen to this, all of us on our panel. This is a journey. We don't know where it's going to take us, but we know that we'll be better on the other end of this journey.
I love it. He's inspired me to continue to come to work and come home with a little bit of grace and empathy and love for my superheroes that are at home. So thank you all very much for today. Becky, turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. That was incredible. And a special thank you to the chief. Everyone was right. That wasn't long enough, and hopefully we can get back for another session. Today's session was recorded, so as a reminder, it will be posted on Facebook and on YouTube. Also, we will be emailing out this recording to everyone who was on today, along with the PDF. And you can also go to the website www.growblueculture.com and download the PDF there also. As a reminder, our next session will be next Wednesday, June 24th at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. We will be diving deeper to uncover the necessary learnings of culture in both policing and society. So every session we have, we're just going to keep digging deeper and deeper. We are still lining up our speakers for next week, but as soon as we have them on board, we will be sending that out in the flyer for everyone. And again, thank you for patience of all those with our email. We are up and going, so please send those questions to info@growblueculture.com. And again, like Jack and Michael said, we did see the questions coming through today, so we will try and get those answered for you and sent back out. Thank you again for everyone for joining us today.
Happy Father's Day.
Weekend.
All right, happy Father's Day. Happy Juneteenth, everybody. Have a great weekend.